Someone can argue at this point that we have become a desensitized population, that we are more about the images as opposed to the issue. We are more about bring us the politics, bring us the drama. That's what we are here for. So what do you feel like media stations have failed in when it comes to objectivity? And do you feel like we as a population have played a key role in that?
Well, there's two sides to this coin. The first is clearly what my fellow panelists have mentioned on sort of an existent duty on media houses. But the other side is also what you'd mentioned earlier, that these are business enterprises. There's a guy called Noam Chomsky who was a huge media critic in the 80s. And in one of his books, he was mentioning that most of us tend to forget that members of the press or persons of media are not public servants. These are just companies out to make profit. But it doesn't mean that they're supposed to walk away from this entire debacle. And I say this because when they pick up an issue that is of public interest, then we expect a strong sense of diligence on their part to report things as they ought to be. And then second, this one now throw it back to the state. Effie had mentioned on the 2010 Constitution, when it was being initiated, there was clear public participation. And you notice that there were state factors playing this role. When media houses sensitized people on the contents of this new constitution, it came as a state factor. And media is a conduit. Both ends, there's the receiving end and there's the giving end. So there's someone giving information and then there's the one receiving. So I would place a burden on them, but only to a certain extent. Yes.
So you feel like there's a role that the citizens play, or do you feel like there's a role the state plays? Who complements the role of the media in terms of objectivity and ensuring that information gets to the common mananchi?
One, I wouldn't place that on the citizens as a whole body, because when people are amassed in groups, there is a way in which emotive factors tend to carry the day. Logic is set aside, and that is why we have governments, so that governments are supposed to maintain an objective view of everything. So I would only blame citizens insofar as we are concerned as individuals. What do you expect when you sit in front of a TV as an individual? So if you expect only to be entertained, then you shouldn't blame media houses for that, because that's what they'll give you. Entertainment sells. But on the wider scope of everything else, I would place the burden and the blame on the state, because the state is the regulator. The state supervises on behalf of the entire population what happens within a country.
Okay, let's have a conversation here. So we are really on this idea that the media failed in terms of objectivity, but on a wider scale, do we feel like politics is what carries the day, and for purposes of business, then they should politic? Because yes, they did have panelists on the opinion polls, but we can clearly tell that they were more focused on drama. I mean, you can clearly tell the theatrics were carrying the day.
I would disagree. I would disagree and say that it is not good enough to say that I'm against politicization of matters. If anything, every single thing about society is politics. Yes, is politics. So how would, let's say, the expansion of the executive be portrayed to the public? How would it be explained to the public? If politician A comes and says, kuna watu ambao walikosa ofisi last time, so lazima tuwatafutie cheo mahali, that is very much explaining it to the common person. That this is about expanding the executive so that we can accommodate more people, which is very much what the thing sought to do. Taking on Effie's point of I remember, I equally really remember, I was in primary school, but remember the draft constitutions, they were in newspaper format. And in a single day, in a single day you could pick 10. If you wanted, you could pick 10. Why was that the case? I think the case with the 2010 constitution was because it was very much a people-led process. We had seen the pain of the old constitution. We really wanted the freedoms, the gains that would come out of a new constitution, as opposed to this one. Why wasn't it out in the public? Because probably they didn't want us to know the contents. They didn't want every other person to know the contents, because the contents are very much an elitist agenda. So they would, as much as possible, hide it from you and good on them that it failed.
Good on them that it failed. It's interesting about the sentiments that you've brought up, because now I feel like when we talk about media objectivity and that particular conversation, I realize that it's not really the fact that the media couldn't, it's that the media didn't want to, quite simply. News Gang is one of those popular citizen TV shows that tries to cut through a lot of the noise and the hullabaloo and get to a couple of things. So last year, they had this conversation when they called it the BBI pageant, I think, and they were asking questions like, this BBI is an elitist agenda. How do you collect views in a public rally? Like they'll say, we are going around to popularize it, and then the question becomes, how are you collecting views in a public rally? In those public rallies, did you see single people, common mwananchi, raising their hands and being given microphones to ask questions, you know? How did we distribute the copies, like you said? Are they in the national language, Kiswahili and English? And yet, we are seeing these very people having conferences with the president and not asking these particular questions. And so it makes me wonder, the media will come and say, but you see, and then so why didn't you ask those questions? You know?
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting concept. Effie, what do you have to weigh in on that?
Again, just like you said, the media is also a business. So if I know this is not going to be good for my business, even I wouldn't do it if I were in their position. So I think they're also in this place where they have to be, one, they have to give the citizens what they need to hear, and two, they also have to just please these elites, because who brings them those adverts they run on their TV?
But even if you were to say they have to give the citizens what they want to hear, they don't even do that. There's a reference to one of the Mombasa rallies that was done in popularization of the BBI, and yet the week before that, there had been a conversation by the common wananchis of that area in Coast, and they came up with a 14-pointer document of the things that they feel should have been addressed in the BBI, and yet the media did not cover that. In fact, the media covered the rally just after expansively. So tell us that you were saying the media should
let me pick up on what he said. He said the reason why the publication of the 2010 Constitution was a little bit more successful was because it was a state initiative, right? This one, it is not necessarily a state initiative, but it is backed by some state organs.
By some state organs?
Yes.
Okay.
So necessarily a state initiative, and therefore the media doesn't really have much business. My biggest question is, why are we holding the media accountable for something that's not on them actually?
Why are we holding the media accountable?
Who is supposed to be held accountable here?
I have a number of answers, but Paul, answer every. Why, in this case, are we holding the media accountable?
You see, when we speak of accountability, there is a strong temptation to slide into the legal aspect of it. And legally speaking, well, we can't.
Yes.
We just don't.
Exactly.
But then we have to realize that we exist in a multifaceted society where law is merely complementary to our daily lives, and there is the expectation of morality. So say if the media, you remember, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago when there was nearly introduced a draconian law that would have gagged them.
Yes.
We, the people, are part of those who are complaining. So it's sort of a social debt. So if we stand up for you, why don't you do the same? And we know of countries where the media has come out strongly opposing regimes that were dictatorial, that were oppressive, and maybe where the public was being hoodwinked. If you even look at things like WikiLeaks wouldn't have happened if the media didn't play a role in it, in publicizing it. So I think from a social point, because we all walk around as social beings, we don't just quote constitutions and laws left, right, and center in our social interactions. They have an obligation.
Mohammed, I'm sure you must have very much to say.
Yeah, they very much have an obligation. You know, you can't say I am in the charcoal business and I want to avoid smoke. It just doesn't work. Yes.
If you can't stand the heat,
you get out of the kitchen. So when you say that you're in the media business, it is very much about informing the public. The question now becomes, what is your duty? What is expected when you're informing the public? Of course, we expect the truth from you. We expect objectivity from you. We expect neutrality from you. So these are these are foundations of the media business. They cannot, media businesses in Kenya cannot just stand up and say, we are a business, we are an enterprise, and that is only what counts, and all of these other foundations, neutrality and objectivity, which is expected of media institutions across the globe, will not apply to us.
Okay. Effie, I think at this point, I'd just like to mention the idea of the 2007-2008 post-election clashes were fueled primarily by a lot of what was being put out on media stations. They have the pull, they have the reach, etc. And therefore, it's very easy for them to sway public opinion. And as such, whenever someone has that much power over the wills and minds of people, it is essential for there to be some level of objectivity and accountability, especially.
Just to add on,
Yes.
Stephanie, the thing is, any country across the globe that has seen a revolution, the media always take a huge credit, especially if they were in support of that revolution.
Yes.
They take a lot of credit for the good that has now befallen the country. Even social media giants this time. Take the example of what was happening recently in Cuba. So there were protests, and the state regulators shut off majority of this mainstream
Yes.
media. But the people could still organize these rallies and protests on social media.
Yes.
And Facebook and Twitter will put out a statement and say that we are in support of democracy, we are in support of freedom of speech. So if they take the credit for the good things that happen to society, so should they for the evil that they bring to society.
And then again, I think at this point it's essential for us to understand whenever it comes to serikali tufanyie or the government should, the government would, who gets this message across to these elites? Because again, there's a very clear divide between the elite and the proletariat in society. So the question is, who gets a message across? When the president wanted to give a speech, he called the senior editors, the editor of news station. And think about how underrepresented you felt as a Kenyan when someone has the audacity to ask, is there a candidate you feel best suited? When someone asks, what would you tell people who are refusing to take vaccines? As if us refusing to take vaccines is the problem we are dealing with, not the inability for us to access vaccines as a citizenry. So I feel like, yes, there's a very big role the media plays, and it continues to manifest itself even in other spaces. But then again, media is not the only place where we saw a lot of compromise in terms of pushing the BBI agenda. If you're just joining us, welcome to the debate circle. Today we are discussing some of the pertinent issues that stayed even after the BBI fell. And so let's transition into state agencies. So we saw a lot of state agencies actively take part, and by actively it means all legs and hands in to push the BBI agenda. The SRC, 2,237 ward reps, all got 2 million shillings each as car grants. These demands, coincidentally, started in 2014. So they've been pushing for car grants in 2014, only for them to be realized around the BBI period. Paul, let me throw it to you. What do you think about how ill-timed that was?
Well, we have to accept some things. I've heard it being codified in our media as deep state. There will always be in any government certain shadowy figures with shadowy interests just lurking within
The shadows.
within the shadows. And our case is no exception. It's no coincidence that 6 years down the line you finally get your car grant,
Yes.
in as much as you don't deserve the car grant, and you're getting it a year or less, or a year or more before an election. So
Perhaps I should even put it in context, especially in the phase of BBI. So His Excellency, or rather the former President Raila Odinga, said it would not influence the MCAs to vote in a certain favor. Remember that for it to pass that particular stage it was in, it needed to be endorsed by 24 out of 47 county assemblies. And within that week, 6 counties unanimously passed the BBI documents. Paul.
So you see, at this point we now have to like fall back to our own internal morality as individuals, because on the face of it, if he says that it's not meant to influence them, then we're all supposed to believe that, but in reality that's not the case. Because all of you are getting car grants, yet a bill is before your house.
Yes.
So I think it also shows a loophole in terms of our systems. And the loophole is that each and every facet, as tight as we think it is subject to a certain sense of manipulation. And this is where the people need to come forth, because we the people, in as much as all these powers is vested in us, we don't necessarily have to wait for that 5-year mark in order for us to pull out our whip. It could have easily been people putting to task the MCAs within their wards and following up from that position. But then all of this has the trouble of falling into an ideological analysis, whereby there's a lot of hopes vis-a-vis what would happen on the ground. So chances are high anyone, even people who are complaining against these guys receiving the car grant, were they in the same position, they just might have done the same thing.
Well, you do make a valid point. Mohammed,
No, the thing on the car grant.
let's continue putting into context. It's
Yes.
not like the MCAs could not access loans to buy cars. They actually did have loan facilities of 2 million each, but it would be in the repayment element of you'd have a 3% interest rate. Then that was changed very quickly, and then the bills was passed.
Yes, and it was now a grant. Remember, the president had hosted MCAs immediately before in popularizing the BBI. And when he was just about to go off stage, they started shouting, car grants, car grants. And he asked, Nini? Car grants. And he said, Nimetumana. That was how it happened. That was exactly how it
Trust
happened.
Mohammed to bring you the tea as in
That is exactly how
this
it happened.
man shall remember.
Yeah, that is how exactly it happened. So they shouted Kagra. So it's just like Paul is saying, it's so saddening that even those independent commissions, because the SRC which approved this grant should be an independent commission.
Yes.
That should not be taking orders from the executive. So it really shows how sometimes those things could be manipulated, even when people who formulated these constitutions have their best interest. I would say that we have the power. Remember, I'll give you the example of Makueni County. There was this MCAs who had given Kivutha Kibwana a lot of trouble in his first term. They wouldn't approve even the budget, so he couldn't govern. The county could not run on projects. What happened in 2017? All of those who were just giving Professor Kivutha Kibwana the trouble because of politics were voted out by the people of Makueni. So I want to believe, I don't want to call them names, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I was just about to. But all of the MCAs who passed this thing unanimously without any due consideration, without thinking about what their constituents would really be interested in, I hope they go home.
But like,
Wow.
Yes, Paul.
sorry to interject,
No, it's
but
all right.
I think I love to play devil's advocate here.
Yes, please.
Now, if we really sit down and be honest with ourselves, was there any other way? Because clearly, this entire thing had fallen into the playground of politics, and in as much as it is a dirty game, as we all know, there are certain rules to it.
Yeah.
And part of the rules is incentives. Yeah, so it was kind of unavoidable.
Incentives is a really nice word for the bribe.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Put some kindness to it.
it.
But yeah, like incentives are a part of it. Look at any democracy stretched across time and even in terms of economic success and whatnot. There's always incentives.
I very much agree with Paul
Yes,
that the president has an agenda.
Yeah.
I have an agenda as the president. My agenda must pass.
Yes.
Politics says that the winner, you must win at all costs. I agree. But the president has the treasury. I am sure there are some shadowy accounts where if money was withdrawn would go unnoticed. That is within the powers of the president. What I have a problem with in principle is the direction to the SRC, which should be an independent commission.
Yeah.
That is where I have the problem, that weakens democracy, that weakens accountability, and all of this faith we have in these institutions.
I like that idea. The idea that quite simply, it's not about the incentive, it's about the law that governs the incentive. It is that you, out of your own pocket, can bribe people. And yes, we would have a problem with that, but we really cannot call you out as much as using state organs to advance personal interests. Now, the Office of the Controller of Budget, 17th February 2021, wrote a letter that was concerned about how to pass this, or rather how to make this work, because the law that existed was really about car loans and not car grants. But it was supposed to be implemented immediately. So tell me, what do you feel about the whole idea of how we went about passing the 4.5 billion shilling car grant for the MCAs?
To me, I feel it's simply the classic case of personal gain. You have the ability to use state machinery, so you use them to your advantage. That's essentially the sequence of what happened here. The president sits in a position whereby he can literally direct any state organ. But then, now the question becomes, how independent is that state organ? If you look at, for example, I'm just going to give an example of someone I love. If you had Maraga sitting in SRC, I don't think things would have gone the same way they did. No, again, it speaks to what kind of people do you put in positions of power and how independent is that institution. The MCAs themselves had the chance to say, okay, we will pass this or we won't pass this. Even after receiving the car grant, they still had the chance to say yes or no. But no, they actually agreed to be bought. So again, it goes back to us. Who do you vote into certain positions of power? Because, you know, there's direct participation where I vote, and then there's indirect participation where these members of parliament, these MCAs, are supposed to represent my interest.
Yeah.
So whose interest were they representing there?
I very much agree with
Yes.
very much agree with Ife that
Yes,
it
please.
boils down to the individual.
Yes.
I like the example she takes of Maraga.
Yes.
There has been talk, I don't know the truth to it, that Maraga said it is the 41 or none.
Yes.
With respect to the judges.
Yes, it is.
That was the man he was. So I would believe that it also comes down to
The person.
individual.
Paul, you were going to say something.
You see, we also have to, because at times when you look at it that way, it's the truth, but it sounds defeated that we'll just have to wait for that day when we are all just straight as a matchstick, which day I doubt will ever
Never
come.
come.
The human rascalities
Yeah,
cannot
yeah.
be legislated against.
But then that's why we have systems, and in as much as no matter how much we try to make our systems well, there's always that element of human imperfection that just brings about a ripple effect towards everything. But I think in this instance, say we were to look at bodies such as the EACC,
Yes.
if they were to be tasked to perform their duty, then we wouldn't have issues of graft. Then say if we were to look at the internal mechanisms of these independent commissions, where each and every commissioner is supposed to adhere to Chapter 6 of the Constitution, then we wouldn't have all these problems. So I think the reason as to why we have such solid laws is that they are coming to mitigate that human error, that element of greed that is in all of us, to be honest. And I think I'm a strong advocate for the fact that the system will in itself cleanse every single thing that is wrong within it. And I think we are bound for that.
Self-correcting systems. I feel like where we are at, I don't know if I'm the only one who feels as if it should have corrected itself by now.
Yeah.
Very much.
I mean, if you were waiting for it to self-correct, clearly it is doing
But-
the least because it's a little bit late.
But, you know, I often look to history to understand the present, and our case is not different. There have been countries across time. If we start from democracy in Athens, if we look at Romans and the Republic, all across time you'll find that there are moments in which a democracy is sort of staggering. Things are not right. The systems are there, but the individuals who are there are just twisted people who won't let it work. So given time, it will, but that doesn't mean that we are supposed to just sit and wait for things to fix themselves.
Okay. That is okay. That's very defeatist of the idea that there's self-correction, but okay. So COVID comes around. Remember that we started popularizing the BBI document around January and February of 2020. March, COVID rolls around, and we have a couple of things that change. And look at the directives that were passed by the Ministry of Health. Look at the directives that were being enforced by the police service in Kenya. So ideally, you had to social distance and mask up. Those are especially key. You have matatus cannot carry over a certain capacity. You cannot congregate in social spaces, weddings, gatherings, etc., were banned for a period of time. Yet, we were still seeing rallies, especially in spaces that were very much crowded and with zero masks. And yet we still had the police service going very hard at ensuring that COVID regulations were sustained, especially in social places. You'd be arrested if you didn't have a mask. You'd be arrested if you were found in a matatu that was filled beyond capacity. So do we feel like the police are setting a tone where they're being used by elitist agendas to push documents like the BBI or agendas like the BBI? Where do we start? Mohammed?
Very much. If I didn't know that you had expectations of the police service.
I
Wow.
know.
That is the thing to
Wow,
begin
wow.
with. Very much, yes. You wouldn't have expectations, any reasonable expectations of the police service. And of course, there are times when they have shocked us, but few are those times. Very few are those times.
There's
yes.
really no coming back from that one.
Few are those times. Yes, they were simply not concerned about the health of people. They were simply not concerned at all. Remember, even just to take you slightly back with this, with the 4.5 billion for the car grants,
Yes.
it was at a time when there were no vaccines in the country.
And the doctors had just previously gone on strike.
Exactly.
And the
people were
SRC made a statement to
saying
the
that
effect
there isn't enough
there
money.
isn't enough money to
Very
pay.
much.
I am almost convinced that 4.5 billion shillings would have paid doctors.
Without a doubt. Those CBS just raised $1 billion to, at the most, the collective bargaining agreement signed with health workers. The thing is, those are the people who led this process. So if anything, even assuming that this document was good, I would urge Kenyans and a lot of young people to go out and simply make sure that it doesn't pass, simply because they showed you the middle finger when it
counted.
When it counted. They told you to come out to the masses, come out that we're popularizing this document. When really people were dying, or hospital staff were not being paid. So even how the whole process went was really a process of we are the people in control, you follow it.
Okay.
Allow me
Yes.
just speak from there. There's a quote that says, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Look at the history of our police service. Has it been good?
Of course not.
Whose interests have they been acting on? There's no time in history I can ever say I have seen the police just be police and just, take care of the citizens and guard the citizens and the interests of the citizens. No, it's
Nobody
about...
even knew that that's what they were supposed to do. We probably are all finding out right now.
For them, it's simply about, okay, who has the deepest pockets?
Yes.
That's where I pledge my allegiance. As much as their allegiance is supposed to be to the office of the presidency, the deputy president, the office, not the person, we have seen a trend where they are used by those in power. Look at the time of Kenyatta. I do not even want to go to the Kisumu massacre 1969. The police were going around and killing people from Kisumu all the way to Kakamega. Just, killing people as long as you're not in support of the president. Look at the time of Moi. Let me not even go there because it's going to get dark. Look at Uhuru's time. They have been used to kill people during the post-election, right? As long as you're not in support. This time, now, they played nice, at least they were protecting people. But who are they protecting? The president and his people as they're going around gallivanting the country and spreading corona like nobody's business.
Just a minute. You would remember that it is the same police service that killed baby Pendo.
Yeah.
It is the same police service that killed the 13-year-old
Yes,
kid.
in
Was it
Moyo.
Yes.
It's the same
Same
police
police that-
service under which a man
Yes.
died for not wearing
The
a mask.
13-year-old, because of COVID, because of curfew regulations, constantly because of a shoe shiner, because he didn't have masks somewhere in Narok, was it? Because all of this, the Kianjokoma twins, because
Kayole.
of yes,
Because of yes.
because of curfew, because of COVID. But when politicians brought out masses,
The
But
size
then-
of the
17th
pockets.
October. Let's just continue putting it into context because there's a lot to discuss. 17th October 2020, Raila, after a press conference, comes out to say that they want to finish this process as fast as is practically possible. Let us collect the signatures that we need within a week. Now, the 7-day average around that time was 741 COVID cases. After the popularization agenda and the signature collection, within 2 weeks, our 7-day average was up to 1,072. I felt like you said but at the beginning. So let's hear that but now.
Okay, see, first, I totally agree with my colleagues here. Like, I absolutely agree with them. It's only that at times, when these issues, you realize they're just recurrent over time, not just in our system, in any system you could think of. Even countries we thought were really forward thinking, then as you grow older, you realize, oh, by the way, there's usually police brutality in the US.
Yeah.
And they are like the beacon of democracy in modern times. So when you sit down and look at all these things, you realize at times we are expecting so much from a system that was designed to function in a particular way. The police officers, since time immemorial, when kings had personal guards, were just foot soldiers for the elite. And it's not different. They're still the same right now. So not unless we decide as a country that we want to approach this thing from a position of amending the entire body, be it all those divisions they have, be it the military, if we cannot do that, then there's nothing new we are going to yield from this entire thing. And we could look at other countries and see that's just the same problem. In the States, they believe that it's white police officers having an issue against black people. When you come to Kenya, it's still the same black police officers that have an issue with
very black.
with also
poor people.
With poor people.
Oh, yeah.
The dynamics have now shifted.
Yes.
But then also, even for the rich people, they're not safe. We've seen when the state is hunting for an individual. A case in point, Miguna.
But
Had a
don't you
house in
feel like it's
Runda,
very
right?
disproportionate that the rate at which your police force or your compromised police force, as we all like to think, would go after a poor person is way higher than that?
Exactly.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But then
it's an anomaly when the same police force that is designed to protect the elite then turns on the elite, and as such, it's very rare occurrences.
Yeah, but you see, the problem here. Yes, the fact that they target poor people is a bad thing, and I vouch for that. But the problem here is the fact that we can't really tell their mind. It just depends on who is sitting on a particular seat. And a country's institution cannot rely on individuals to that extent. That's why we need to do an overhaul of the whole system or the whole police force. We say that for the next 1 year, considering we don't keep records, that's what I assume, we can't tell which police officer broke which rule at what time. We'd say that for the next 1 year, we're going to do fresh recruit for each and every division. And then these guys who are ongoing are supposed to go back to training. And then they're supposed to be vetted, and then when they come back, we do body cams, dashboard cameras, and all that. At least start somewhere. Yeah.
I've always
Quite
been
ambitious.
quite ambitious, but I've always been of the opinion that nobody gets into the police force with the idea that they want to kill Baby Pendo or Yasin Moyo. They always get corrupted somewhere along the line because perhaps the external influences are stronger than the internal ones. Now, let's go into the legal element of the BBI document, the Office of the Attorney General. This was the office that crafted the BBI document, of course in conjunction with a couple more lawyers. Now let us discuss the mandate of the Attorney General and versus what we have seen the Attorney General do, especially in push for the BBI document. Is the Attorney General's office there for public gain? Mohammed.
Yes, and he's the chief advisor to government.
Yes.
A lot of people who were proponents of BBI would argue that this was in the best interest of public gain. That this document was in the best interest of Kenyans, that we as the Jubilee government of President Uhuru Kenyatta are working to make sure that there is national unity in this country. And in order to achieve national unity, we've thought of this document. So I think in trying to look at the Attorney General's office from the point of did he act in the best interest of the public, I think it will be a slippery slope to start arguing on the contrary, to say that he wasn't acting, because he would say that this was in the best interest of the public because it was advanced by a government duly elected by Kenyans.
Okay.
Did he do a terrible job at drafting the document? Of course, yes. Well, that was the determination of two courts. So did he do a terrible job at at thinking about who could come up with a referendum or whether the sitting president could now become a Wanjiku. All of that should have been things that the Attorney General, I think, with all the lawyers in hand, would have thought of.
Which is exactly what the question is at this point. Did the Attorney General really sincerely act in the best interest of the people with the full knowledge that a president cannot then become a citizen and advance something that should change the constitution?
I would say they missed it because that was a key point of contention in the courts to determine who can propose a referendum.
Yes.
The Court of Appeal even went further ahead to say that Dennis Waweru and Juliet Mohammed cannot be common citizens, that they cannot be a Wanjiku while sitting in parliament. So I think that they missed that point. Am I happy they missed? Of course.
Did they miss it though? I wonder
Intentionally.
how. What are the
Intentionally.
No, I do not think. They would
what is the
understand that they are
qualification?
smarter lawyers than them. If they thought they were the smartest, they would think that
But
Justice
what is
Kiagi...
the qualification of someone who is supposed to sit in the office of the Attorney
Attorney
General? It's
General.
the highest legal office in the land.
But
it should be beyond. It should be beyond mistakes like we just did not think that the president should not.
Yeah.
No, but Justice Kihara Kiriuki, just 1 minute, Paul, I'm sorry. Justice Kihara Kiriuki has no history of litigation. He has no history of...
And no history of winning any case for the
case of
president.
constitutional...
Should I be concerned at this
litigation.
point?
But then if we say they missed it, we're kind of being like unnecessarily kind.
We're being very passive.
Thank you very much.
Because
Pacifying it,
if
yes.
we say they missed it, then it means it was a negligent act.
Yes.
And I think not. I think it was willful. It was very deliberate. And
To miss it.
And here's the thing.
Yes, it was
Here's the
very-
thing. Yeah. To play coy as
Okay.
if we didn't see it,
Yes.
so we're just going to behave as if it's not there.
Yes.
Because take any, we'll just pick, say, a law student who's done their constitutional law. And then you give them all those things that were contained in the BBI document and then ask them, would you rather have this as a new constitution? I think they would say no. The answer would be no. And here's the thing. When you scan the entire document, what it presents are two things. Obviously, there's bad and good. Whatever is good insofar as it can be implemented as policy, not an amendment of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And it's good insofar as it's restating what is existent in the document. And whatever was bad, which was now the truth behind the document, we now see the mind of the political elites. I'd given an example of EACC under Chapter 15, the way the document was mentioned. But then it went ahead to now give its truth, the truthful nature of why it touched on EACC. EACC was meant to be placed under the office of the president, clearly going against the existence of EACC as an independent commission. So now you see, so we can't just say that a whole attorney general, the qualifications for being an attorney general are equivalent to a judge of a court of appeal.
Yes.
That means it's either 10 years
years of
experience in academia, or 10 years experience in legal practice, or 10 years experience as a judge. So you see, it's so competent that we can't expect someone to make such mistakes when they assume that office. That's why I think it was very willful, whatever they did, and I absolutely place my money on the fact that they did not act in the best interest of Kenya.
Dollar that for sure. And I think I'd ask you, Mohammed, yes? This is a document that failed at the High Court and was then repealed at the Court of Appeal. And the same thing stood that the president could not initiate a popular amendment. And they still want to go further ahead and appeal it at the Supreme Court. Was that intentional, or was it, we just, oops, we missed it. Would you look at oops?
I think when you, I think when you hold certain offices, you do not have the luxury of oops moments.
Yes.
That's the first thing that should be set on the table. And the AG has a track record of losing cases. I'm not sure how he didn't see this one coming. Because you cannot...
We're being very bold today,
No.
I see.
Yeah. Like,
It's a matter of-
well, I literally took time and studied the BBI. I had a couple of friends and we were just looking at it. And what we did was we looked at it and looked at our constitution and things that were in the BBI and things that were in the constitution, and almost all the 9 principles have been covered in our constitution.
Yes.
Is it so hard to make an act of parliament if they feel there should be a policy that they should pass? No, it's not. Of course, it might be hard for them to see it and do their job, but hey,
But
come
the
on.
Constitution gives them that mandate
Yes.
to legislate.
Exactly. So you can't tell me our whole Attorney General and all the lawyers working under him and all the interns they misuse. You can't tell me they will look at that document and draft it like that, not thinking this document is actually going to fail. I think in my mind, maybe they felt it wouldn't go that far. They felt it wouldn't go to court and people would just, embrace it because it's Raila and Uhuru and they're the two most popular men in the land and people will just follow through. But no, I think Kenyans have come to a point that we know we will not learn from the media, we will not learn from school textbooks, so we take time and learn things on our own. And every person who was serious about knowing what the BBI says did not watch the news, they actually read that BBI on their own. And for someone who did that, you can't tell me the AG could not see what I saw in that BBI.
Well, that is actually a very valid point, that if normal citizens were able to see the flaw, then how did that whole office of the Attorney General
We are just
miss that flaw?
Perhaps
We're
I can
excusing
defend him.
nonsense.
Perhaps
Okay.
I can defend him.
Now he wants to play the devil's advocate, by all means.
And I'll defend him in light of previous holders of the office. There was a fine line between being counsel to the office of the president and being counsel to the president himself. So I think the Attorney General misconstrued his constitutional mandate to advise the president, the office of the
opposed-
president, and considered himself as a personal lawyer to the president.
I'm not too sure that's absolving. If anything, that makes
But
it worse.
take, yes,
That is a flaw in English
No, I
language.
mean, like, it's
but take both
That is a
scenarios.
flaw in English language, Lord.
Take both scenarios.
Yes.
I would want to assume that any lawyer's primary job is to win the case for the
their
client. So assume you would say that he a counsel to the office of the president or government. His primary duty is to make sure that government agenda, legal government agenda, can go through and can be formulated.
and
The Attorney General shall promote, protect, and uphold the rule of law and defend public interest. Paul.
Article 1 of the Constitution. All sovereign power belongs to the people.
Like how we're acquiring.
No, the thing is, the Attorney General's office is very much a political office. Every way you think about it, every way you think
Hey,
about it. Yes, take the example of even America, let's say, with Jeff Sessions, when he was the Attorney General for Trump. So it's very much a political office because you're fighting for government agenda. Your work is to formulate government agenda in a way that it can succeed. So if we say that he deliberately missed this, to do what? To make sure that it fails? Then the man is a good man.
No, Moha, let me bring something home. I think one thing that we learned in professional ethics was duties of an advocate to the client,
Yes.
duties of an advocate to the court, to the society, So there is that hierarchy. The moment, yes, one of my duty to my client is to defend my client in the best way possible. And that is ensuring I win his or her case in court, right?
Yes.
But before that, there is an overriding duty to uphold the rule of law. There is an overriding duty to the court and there is an overriding duty to the society at large. There is no way the AG can put his duty to the president, because this was a duty to the president, over his duty to the public, and that is public
So
interest.
are you saying he took his duty to society higher than his duty to government?
no,
The man is a good man.
no, Mohammed,
Kelvin, come out.
let me add on what Effie has stated.
Yes.
Let me add
Yes.
on what Effie has stated. So first, he's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya.
Exactly.
Principally, any advocate, any lawyer is an agent of the courts, an instrument of justice. Let me add, a fine instrument of justice, which means they are bound to act within the confines of the law. Now, when we look at the confines of the law, we bring ourselves to the office of the Attorney General. It's not just a lawyer's chambers as any other lawyer, whereby the interests of your client take precedence of everything. No. First and foremost, he's a public servant.
Yeah.
Second, he's operating within the precincts of the Constitution. The Constitution states that all sovereign power belongs to the people. So when he's acting in public interest, when he's acting in advising the government, then it comes back to that point. Does it go in line with those who hold sovereign power?
Okay.
So did
Yes.
the Attorney General's office deliberately put loopholes to ensure that the BBI failed because he is very much a good public servant?
No.
That is a very good question
No.
for the Attorney
my
General in his office. Calvin Kamau feels like when your job relies on not seeing things, you can't see them. I really cannot see a better way to sum up the entire conversation on the role of the AG. When your job relies on not seeing things,
You won't see them.
simply
But
will
then-
not see them.
It's his job according to who?
Well, 2022. So we are of course gearing into the electioneering period, and we are having these many discussions on some of these platforms, and I think these are still the same institutions that play a critical role in pushing the 2022 electioneering agenda. So it's still the media. We're looking at the police force. We're looking at state organs like SRC, IEBC, the police service, the legislative arm of government. In short, are we royally screwed at this point? Is there anything that we can do for ourselves at this point? Because clearly we are having issues with objectivity, especially when it comes to pushing state agendas by state machinery.
Yeah, well, here's what I can say on that. We are in a way, to quote you, royally screwed. We are in a way, but there's a rider to it. And this rider is what would help us sort of avoid the royal screwing that waits us. The rider is this. If we can first and foremost understand the definitive roles of all these key players. And the first one is on the media. We can blame them, but only to a certain extent. To the extent that we also need to understand that they are pawns in a larger scheme.
Okay.
Back to that guy I mentioned earlier, Noam Chomsky. He mentioned that most of the time when the media seems to banter towards state lies or state propaganda, it's most of the time unintentional. Because most of these media houses, when you check keenly, the people who own them have vested political interests. And yet these media houses are their own personal outfits. So definitely they'll play to the interests of their masters. Then, when it comes to roles, we as the people also ought to understand our own roles. So far so good, it's unheard of in this country where an MP or an MCA has been impeached by an initiative of the people. We rarely use that. We just assume that once these guys have gone, we just have to wait for the 5-year mark so that we can remove them. If we understand our role in this entire thing and realize the weight and strength of Article 1, then we're not really as screwed as we think, as it seems here.
There's a caveat to that. Mohammed, what happens now? So now we're here.
Yes.
We have clearly established that we are in a state where our government is easily compromised. We are in a state where our state organs have been susceptible, and some of the biggest other avenues like the media are clearly under state play. So what happens now? Do we
It's a
just
sad-
rest and decide to disband the country and go our separate ways?
Absolutely
Good
not.
idea.
Recover
It's a-
from the trauma for a bit of time, perhaps?
It's a sad state of affairs that the media has been co-opted into an agenda that wasn't in the best interest of the public. But equally what is more sad is that legislative organs were equally co-opted into that. They should be protectors of democracy.
Yes.
The county assemblies, the National Assembly. So I would say there isn't much hope to begin with in the National Assembly. So think of think of situations where
Mohammed is
governors have
convinced
been
there is no
impeached.
hope anywhere, not in the Attorney General,
No,
not
no,
in the
no, there
police
is-
service, not in
I
the
mean, there is
There is a
evidence.
lot of
I'm
hope
even
in the
scared of
judiciary.
introducing the judiciary.
No, there's a lot of hope in the judiciary.
Wow.
Extremely good hope.
Yeah.
But take the county assemblies, even in situations where we felt Governor A was corrupt, it is it is not just okay to think that Governor A was corrupt and he couldn't perform his duty as expected. It is equally pertinent that we look at the process of how that governor was impeached. What was at play? Did they have political fights with the president? And you would see that county assemblies have always, almost always, been the worst protectors of the democracy that people bestowed with them. When it comes to parliament, parliament has always been the government of the day, that whoever who has majority succeeds in parliament. So there should be people who stand against that line of we're just following the party's line or we're towing the party's line, but it isn't as easy. You would take the examples of Republicans and Democrats in the US. You would think that whenever a Republican caucus happens, all representatives of the Republican Party would come out chanting the party's line. You saw what happened with the Conservative Party in Britain during Brexit, that those who were against Brexit ended up being kicked out. So I don't see much hope in the media. I equally don't see much hope in the county assemblies. I don't see much hope in parliament. I see a lot of hope in the public. And in judiciary.
Okay. Effie, you saw?
For me, I actually tend to agree with him because at this point, we cannot keep relying on the media to give us information. Go find it for yourself. Go read that constitution. Go read that act of parliament that has been passed by your area MP. It is a time, I would say we are doomed, but it's time Kenyans wake up. Because
well, why would they wake up if they're doomed? Isn't it better to stay in slumber?
No, it's time we wake up because one, the whole problem starts from electing people who have a personal agenda. This president came into power because it was his birthday. Let's start from there. Okay? Tuamkeni asubuhi tuende tupe president birthday gift. You know. So if we elect people on such shallow grounds, then we are doomed and we are sinking down a hole that we are never going to get back up from. So the moment we as Kenyans decide to be objective in our decisions, why do we elect this MP? Why do people vote? The same people who have been implicated in scandals, the same people who have cases in ICC, the same people who are being investigated for certain crimes or being investigated for corruption. Yet, these are the same people we are going to vote into parliament. Come 2022, you wait and see this wash guys coming into parliament. It is upon us. I feel Kenyans have this habit of, instead of holding people accountable, we try to apportion blame.
And sanitize them.
Exactly. So it comes to a time when we need to wake up and stop this, okay, let's find someone to blame, and instead hold this person accountable. I voted for you, you are supposed to do ABC. What have you done? Instead of waiting for them to come and lie to us again after 5 years, and then we give them another birthday gift or an anniversary gift for them to go back to parliament.
No.
So it all comes down back to us.
Okay. We'd like to hear what you think as we wind up this particular conversation. There's still an entire conversation around the judiciary, especially the role that it has played in protecting Kenyan democracy, coming from a space where we felt like the judiciary was really oppressed. There's a lot of positive talk around it, but that's a whole different conversation for another day considering this panel. So very quickly, Paul, what is your 1 minute parting shot around the conversation we've had today? What has the BBI taught us? What has the BBI taught you? Not just in terms of it falling or it rising, but basically as at where we are at as a democracy and as a people.
Well, first, there's a lot of hope for Kenyans. It's not as apocalyptic as it seems. There's a lot of hope for us, considering the fact that there were a lot of initiatives opposing the document in court. As we saw, even just ordinary citizens making their case in court against the document. So there's a lot of hope. Second thing, we need to zealously defend this document. It's one of the greatest things that has emanated from our independence, and it has done so about 50 years after we were independent. So it's 50 years of struggle, of toil, of painful memories, but we can make it right. And we can make it right by defending it. I am a strong believer in the fact that the system in the end flashes out all these unwanted characters. We've seen it.
Can we have a conversation with the system? Can we meet behind the tent?
Here is it. Here it is. Here it is. Defending the Constitution is giving the system a chance.
Yeah.
Look at democracies such as the US. You check their earliest history, it was worse than what we have when we had the Wild West and all that.
Yes.
But then the system in and of itself came and patched up all these holes and made things right. The step we took 11 years ago in enacting this document was a bold and good step. But now we also have to give it time in order for its fullness to spread its tentacles across all aspects of Kenyan life. Yeah.
Right. Mohammed, very quickly, your parting shot?
No, the whole process taught us that kuna wenye nchi na kuna wananchi.
Kelvin Kamau, and that's not things that sitting your election ifanywe on your birthday. That must be the trick. So,
Exactly.
that wenye nchi, it's just your birthday.
Yes.
One big birthday.
But now, it is not that the wananchi do not have hope.